The sun had barely risen when Mrs. Sarah opened the curtains in Jack's room. Golden light flooded the space, revealing a room filled with colorful drawings on the walls and toys carefully arranged on shelves. In the center of the room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, was Jack, a 10-year-old boy with messy brown hair and emerald green eyes that seemed to see beyond the world around him. "Good morning, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, approaching her son. Jack didn't respond, continuing to spin a small bicycle wheel between his fingers, fascinated by the constant circular motion. Sarah sighed, sitting down next to her son. Since his autism diagnosis at age 3, she and her husband, Tom, had worked tirelessly to find ways to connect with Jack. But the boy remained in his own world, rarely making eye contact or responding to calls. "Let's have breakfast, Jack. Daddy made pancakes," she tried again, this time lightly touching her son's shoulder. Jack stopped spinning the wheel for a moment, his eyes briefly focusing on his mother's face before returning to the object in his hands. In the kitchen, Tom was setting the table, the aroma of fresh coffee and pancakes filling the air. He smiled as he saw Sarah enter, followed by Jack, who sat down silently at the table. "How's our champion today?" Tom asked, affectionately ruffling his son's hair. Jack didn't react, his eyes fixed on the window overlooking the field behind the house. As they ate, Sarah and Tom exchanged worried glances. "I spoke with Dr. Anderson yesterday," Sarah began, her voice low. "She suggested trying a new therapy, something related to music." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "We can try. We've tried so many things. Who knows? Maybe this will be the key to reaching Jack." The couple continued the conversation in hushed tones, discussing possibilities and sharing their hopes and fears. Jack, oblivious to his parents' conversation, continued to look out the window, his eyes following the movement of leaves on the trees. After breakfast, while Sarah washed the dishes and Tom prepared for work, Jack silently slipped out of the house. His bare feet touched the cool grass in the backyard, and he began walking towards the field that stretched beyond the property. Sarah, noticing her son's absence, looked out the kitchen window and saw Jack walking away. "Tom!" she called, a touch of concern in her voice. "Jack is heading to the field." Tom ran outside, reaching his son in a few steps. "Hey, champ! Where are you going?" he asked, gently holding Jack's hand. To Tom's surprise, Jack didn't resist. Instead, he lightly pulled his father's hand, as if wanting to lead him along. Tom looked at Sarah, who was watching from the kitchen door, and shrugged. "All right, let's see what you want to show us," Tom said, allowing Jack to guide him. Sarah joined them, and together the family walked through the field, Jack leading the way with a determination his parents rarely saw. After a few minutes, they reached a small stream surrounded by leafy trees. The soft sound of running water filled the air, and a cool breeze caressed their faces. Jack let go of his father's hand and approached the stream bank, his eyes fixed on something beyond the trees. Sarah and Tom followed their son's gaze and gasped. There, partially hidden among the trees, was a majestic wild horse. The animal, with its golden brown coat gleaming under the morning sun, cautiously observed the newcomers. "My God," Sarah whispered, amazed. "Have you ever seen this horse before, Tom?" Tom shook his head, equally surprised. "Never. I didn't know there were wild horses around here." While the parents talked in low voices, Jack stepped forward, his green eyes fixed on the horse. The animal, usually skittish around strangers, seemed to relax under the boy's serene gaze. To Sarah and Tom's astonishment, Jack slowly extended his hand towards the horse. The animal hesitated for a moment, but then cautiously approached, its muzzle gently touching Jack's open palm. Time seemed to freeze in that instant. Jack, the boy who rarely showed emotions, broke into a radiant smile. His eyes sparkled with a joy his parents had never seen before. Sarah brought her hand to her mouth, tears of emotion streaming down her cheeks. Tom hugged his wife, both witnessing a miracle before their eyes. "Hello," Jack said softly, his voice almost a whisper. It was the first word his parents had heard him say in months. The horse whinnied softly in response, as if understanding the importance of that moment. Jack continued to caress the animal's muzzle, his smile never wavering. At that moment, on the banks of an unknown stream, with a wild horse as witness, Sarah and Tom felt a spark of hope ignite in their hearts. Perhaps, they thought, this was the beginning of a new journey for their family, a journey of discoveries, connections, and above all, unconditional love. As the sun rose in the sky, bathing the scene in golden light, the family remained there, marveling at the magic of the moment and the infinite possibilities that the future might bring. In the weeks following the encounter with the wild horse, a subtle yet significant change began to manifest in Jack. The boy, previously so isolated in his own world, now showed a new energy, a sparkle in his eyes that his parents could hardly believe. Every morning, Jack woke up before the sun rose, eager to visit his new friend. Sarah and Tom, still amazed at their son's transformation, took turns accompanying him to the stream. On one of these mornings, as they walked through the dewy field, Sarah observed her son with a mixture of joy and apprehension. "Jack," she called softly, "do you want to give the horse a name?" To her surprise, Jack stopped, turning to face her. His green eyes, normally distant, now focused directly on hers. "Light," he said, his voice clear and decided. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. It was the first time Jack had directly answered a question in years. "Light," she repeated, smiling. "That's a beautiful name, sweetheart." When they reached the stream, Light was already waiting for them, his golden coat gleaming under the first rays of sun. Jack approached confidently, extending his hand to caress the animal's muzzle. Sarah watched in wonder at the interaction between the two, the connection palpable in the air. At home, Tom was preparing breakfast, his mind full of worries. Although he was excited about Jack's progress, he couldn't ignore the financial reality surrounding them. The small craft store he managed in the neighboring town was facing difficulties, and bills were starting to pile up. When Sarah and Jack returned, Tom greeted them with a forced smile. "How was the walk?" he asked, serving pancakes to his son. "It was amazing, Tom," Sarah replied, her eyes shining with emotion. Jack gave the horse a name. He called him Light. Tom looked at his son in surprise, who was eating his pancakes in silence, a slight smile playing on his lips. That's wonderful," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. Later that morning, while Jack played in the backyard, Sarah found Tom in his small office, hunched over a pile of papers. "What's wrong, dear?" she asked, noticing her husband's worried expression. Tom sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. "The store, Sarah. Sales have dropped drastically in the last month. If it continues like this, I don't know if we'll be able to keep it open." Sarah sat down next to her husband, holding his hand. "We'll figure it out. We always have." "There's more," Tom continued hesitantly. "I received a job offer in New York City." Silence fell heavily between them. New York City meant opportunities, but it also meant leaving behind everything they knew. It meant taking Jack away from Light. "We can't," Sarah said finally, her voice firm. "We can't take this away from Jack. Not now." Tom nodded, although worry still weighed on his shoulders. "I know, but we need to think of something. And fast." As the couple discussed possible solutions, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Grace, Sarah's neighbor and best friend. "You need to see this," she exclaimed, her voice overflowing with excitement. "Come to the fence. Quickly." Intrigued, Sarah and Tom ran to the backyard, calling Jack along the way. When they reached the fence that divided their properties, they were stunned by the scene before them. In the field that stretched between the two houses, Jack was riding Light. The boy, normally so disconnected from the world around him, seemed perfectly in tune with the horse. His movements were graceful, almost as if the two were one being. "My God," Sarah whispered, grabbing Tom's arm. Mrs. Grace, a white-haired lady with a kind face, smiled radiantly. "I've never seen anything like it," she commented, her eyes shining with admiration. "That boy has a gift." As they watched Jack and Light galloping across the field, an idea began to form in Tom's mind. He turned to Sarah, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. What if we could turn this into something more?" Sarah looked at her husband, confused. "Now, what do you mean?" "Think about it," Tom explained, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "Jack has a special connection with Light. What if we could use that? Maybe we could create an equine therapy program right here, on our property. The idea hung in the air, full of possibilities. Sarah felt her heart race at the prospect. "Do you think it would work?" "I don't know," Tom admitted. "But it's worth trying, isn't it? We could help other children like Jack, and at the same time, create a new source of income for our family." Mrs. Grace, who had overheard the conversation, enthusiastically intervened. "What a wonderful idea. I know several families in town who could benefit from a program like this." While the adults excitedly discussed the possibilities, Jack and Light continued their silent dance across the field. The midday sun bathed the scene in golden light, as if blessing the beginning of a new journey. That night, after Jack went to bed, Sarah and Tom sat on the porch watching the stars. The air was charged with hope and possibilities. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," Tom commented. Holding his wife's hand, Sarah nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "Yes, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're on the right track." The stars twinkled above them, silent witnesses to a new chapter opening in the family's life. A chapter of challenges, certainly, but also of love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. As the night progressed, the distant sound of a neigh echoed across the field, as if Light too was celebrating the new possibilities that tomorrow would bring. The sun had barely risen when Sarah found Jack already awake, sitting on the porch with a dreamy look. In the past few days, since the idea of the equine therapy program had emerged, a new energy seemed to emanate from the entire family. "Good morning, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, sitting down next to her son. To her surprise, Jack turned and looked directly at her. "Mom," he said, his voice as clear as the dawn, "Light is waiting." Sarah felt her heart leap. These were the first words Jack had spontaneously addressed to her in years. Fighting back tears of joy, she nodded. "Let's go see him then, dear." As they walked towards the stream, Sarah couldn't help but notice how Jack seemed more present, more connected to the world around him. His eyes, once always distant, now keenly observed the wildflowers in the field, the clouds in the sky, the butterflies dancing in the air. However, when they reached the spot where Light usually was, they found only the murmuring stream and the undulating grass. The horse was nowhere to be seen. Jack stopped, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. Sarah, sensing her son's anxiety, suggested, "Let's look around a bit, honey. Maybe Light went for a walk." They walked for a few minutes, Jack leading the way with a determination Sarah had never seen before. Suddenly, the boy stopped, pointing to a clearing ahead. There, surrounded by a small group of wild horses, was Light. The golden horse seemed to be interacting with the others, exchanging soft neighs and muzzle touches. Jack took a step forward, hesitant. Light, sensing his presence, raised his head and whinnied softly. To Sarah's surprise, the other horses didn't flee. Instead, they curiously watched as Jack approached. "Hello, Light," Jack said softly, extending his hand. The horse approached, gently touching the boy's face with his muzzle. Sarah watched in wonder. It was as if Jack and Light had their own language, a connection that went beyond words. At that moment, they heard footsteps approaching. It was Tom, accompanied by a man Sarah didn't recognize. "Ah, there you are," Tom said, a smile on his lips. "I want to introduce someone. This is Dr. Henry Matthews. He's a veterinarian and equine therapy specialist." Dr. Matthews, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, greeted Sarah with a warm handshake. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Tom told me about your idea and I was fascinated." While the adults talked, Jack continued his silent interaction with Light and the other horses. Dr. Matthews watched attentively, his face a mixture of surprise and admiration. "This is extraordinary," he muttered. "I've never seen a child connect like this with wild horses." Tom nodded, proud. "Jack has a special gift. That's why we thought about starting the equine therapy program." Dr. Matthews frowned thoughtfully. "It's a wonderful idea, but I must warn you, it won't be easy. There are many regulations and requirements to start a program like this." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. "What kind of requirements?" "Well," the veterinarian began, "first, we would need to properly domesticate and train the horses. This can take months. Then there's the matter of facilities. You would need an adequate stable, an arena for sessions, safety equipment. The list went on, and with each new item, Sarah felt the weight of reality fall on her shoulders. Looking at Tom, she saw the same concern reflected in his eyes. "And how much would all this cost?" Tom asked, his voice betraying his apprehension. "Doctor..." Matthews hesitated before answering. "It's a considerable investment. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, at least." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah and Tom exchanged worried looks. The dream that had been born so bright just days ago now seemed distant and impossible. It was then that Jack, who had remained oblivious to the adults' conversation, approached. Holding his mother's hand, he said with surprising clarity, "We can do this." Everyone turned to look at the boy. Surprised, Jack, usually so withdrawn, now faced them with determination. Dr. Matthews knelt down to be at eye level with Jack. "You really want to help other children, don't you?" Jack nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. The veterinarian stood up, a new light in his eyes. "You know," he said, addressing Sarah and Tom. "Yeah, maybe we can find a way to make this work. I know some organizations that offer grants for projects like this, and I'm sure the community would be happy to help." Hope began to be reborn in Sarah and Tom's hearts. Maybe, with hard work and a little help, they could turn this dream into reality. As they walked back home, discussing ideas and possibilities, Sarah couldn't help but notice how Jack seemed more animated, more present. It was as if the challenge ahead had awakened something in him. That night, after dinner, the family gathered on the porch. The starry sky seemed to reflect the infinite possibilities that lay before them. "So it's going to be difficult," Tom said, breaking the silence. Sarah nodded, squeezing her husband's hand. "Yes, but it's worth it, for Jack, for Light, and for all the other children we could help." Jack, sitting between his parents, looked at the sky and then at his parents. In a soft voice, but full of conviction, he said, "Together we are stronger." Sarah and Tom looked at each other, moved. At that moment, under the starry blanket of night, they knew that no matter how difficult the path ahead, they would face it together. As a family, and so lulled by the night breeze and the distant sound of horses in the field, they began to plan for the future, a future full of challenges, but also of hope, love, and infinite possibilities. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity for the family. The dream of creating an equine therapy center had transformed into a mission, and everyone was committed to making it a reality. Tom, with his experience in administration, dove headfirst into the necessary bureaucracy to start the project. He spent hours on the phone, talking to local authorities, filling out forms, and seeking legal guidance. At night, he pored over spreadsheets and budgets, trying to find ways to financially make the dream viable. Sarah, in turn, took on the task of mobilizing the community. With her charismatic personality and the enthusiastic support of Mrs. Grace, she organized meetings at the neighborhood association, explaining the project and asking for help. To her surprise and joy, the response was overwhelmingly positive. "It's amazing how willing people are to help," Sarah commented to John one evening as they reviewed the day's notes. Mr. Thompson from the carpentry shop offered to build the stable stalls, and Mrs. Martinez from the fabric store wants to make blankets for the horses. John smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. This community is truly special, but we still have a long way to go. Meanwhile, Michael spent every free moment with Lightning and the other horses. Under the careful supervision of Dr. Harrison, who visited the property regularly, the boy was learning the fundamentals of equine care and the basics of horseback riding. It was during one of these visits that something extraordinary happened. Dr. Harrison was explaining to Michael how to properly brush Lightning's coat when he noticed the boy seemed distracted, staring fixedly at something beyond the pasture. "Fine, what is it, Michael?" the veterinarian asked gently. To his surprise, Michael pointed to a mare in the farthest corner of the field. "She needs help," the boy said, his voice clear and concerned. Intrigued, Dr. Harrison followed Michael to the spot. As they approached, he realized that the mare indeed seemed uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one hoof to another. Carefully, the veterinarian examined the animal and discovered a small cut on her hind leg, almost invisible to the naked eye. "Michael," he said, amazed. "How did you notice this?" Michael just shrugged, his eyes fixed on the injured mare. "I felt it," he answered simply. Dr. Harrison treated the wound right there, impressed by Michael's keen perception. When he finished, he turned to the boy with a broad smile. "You have a special gift, Michael. A true gift for understanding these animals." That evening, during dinner, Dr. Harrison shared the incident with Sarah and John. "You have an extraordinary son," he said, his eyes shining with admiration. "With proper training, Michael could become an excellent equine therapist." The veterinarian's words lit a new flame of hope in the parents' hearts. It wasn't just about creating an equine therapy center now. It was about opening up a world of possibilities for their son. However, not everything was smooth sailing. As the project progressed, new challenges emerged. The biggest one came in the form of an official letter from the local city hall. "They're questioning the use of the land," John explained to Sarah, his voice heavy with concern. "Apparently, our property isn't zoned for this type of activity. We need special authorization." Sarah felt the weight of frustration. "And how long could that take?" John sighed. "Months, maybe. And there's no guarantee it will be approved." The couple spent the night discussing alternatives, feeling the dream they had so carefully built beginning to crumble. It was Michael who, once again, brought light to the situation. The next morning, as his parents were talking quietly in the kitchen, he entered holding a drawing. "Look, Mum," he said, extending the paper. "It's our dream home." Sarah and John looked in wonder at the drawing. It was a colorful and detailed representation of the property, with a large stable, a riding arena, and several children riding horses. In the center of the drawing, a family of 3 smiled, holding hands. "It's beautiful." "Sans-Matis," Sarah said, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. Michael pointed to the drawing. "We're going to build this together," he said, his voice full of conviction. At that moment, looking at their son's hope-filled drawing, Sarah and John felt their determination renewed. They would face any obstacle, overcome any challenge. For Michael's sake, for the sake of the other children they could help, they would make this dream come true. "You're right, my love," John said, hugging his son. "We're going to build this together, and nothing will stop us." As the family embraced, united by a common dream, the distant sound of a neigh echoed across the field. It was as if Lightning and the other horses were also celebrating, as if they too knew that together, this family was capable of overcoming any obstacle. The morning sun bathed the kitchen in its golden light, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. And there, in that moment of unity and determination, the family felt that no matter what the future held, they were on the right path. The path of love, understanding, and the realization of dreams. As summer came to an end, bringing with it winds of change, the trees in the field began to tinge with gold and red, reflecting the transformations occurring in the family's life and in the surrounding community. News about the equine therapy project had spread through the region like wildfire. What had begun as a family dream was now the main topic of conversation in town. Many saw it as an opportunity for community growth, while others expressed concerns about the changes such an endeavor could bring. On a particularly busy morning, Sarah found herself in front of a diverse group of residents at the neighborhood association. She had been invited to officially present the project and address the community's questions. "I understand your concerns," Sarah said, her voice firm but gentle. "But believe me, this center won't be just for Michael. It will be for all children and families who need support. It will be a place of healing and hope for our community." Among the crowd, Mrs. Gloria stood up, her eyes shining with emotion. "I support this project wholeheartedly. I've seen with my own eyes the change in young Michael. If we can offer this opportunity to other children, how can we not embrace this idea?" Mrs. Gloria's words seemed to touch something deep in those present. Gradually, more voices rose in support, and Sarah felt a wave of gratitude and relief wash over her. Meanwhile, at City Hall, John was facing his own battle. Sitting before Mayor Augustus, he presented the benefits of the project for the city for the umpteenth time. "I understand your vision, Mr. Wilson," the mayor said, rubbing his temples, "but regulations exist for a reason. We can't simply ignore them. John leaned forward, his eyes shining with determination. Mr. Augustus, we're not asking to ignore the rules, we're asking to adapt them. This project could put our city on the map as a center for innovation in alternative therapies. Think about the opportunities this will bring. The mayor fell silent for a moment, contemplating John's words. Finally, with a deep sigh, he nodded. Very well. I'll call an extraordinary meeting of the City Council. I can't promise anything, but we'll give your project a chance. While the adults navigated the labyrinth of bureaucracy and public opinion, Michael continued his journey of discovery with Lightning and the other horses. Under Dr. Harrison's patient guidance, the boy was learning not only about horseback riding, but also about communication, empathy, and trust. On a particularly memorable afternoon, Dr. Harrison decided to introduce a new exercise. He blindfolded Michael and guided him to Lightning. Now, Michael, he instructed gently, I want you to mount Lightning without using your sight. Trust your other senses. Trust the horse. For a moment, Michael stood still, his breathing quickened. Then, slowly, he extended his hands, feeling Lightning's soft coat. With careful movements, he found the horse's mane and, to Dr. Harrison's amazement, managed to mount without assistance. Incredible, the veterinarian murmured, observing the perfect harmony between boy and animal. When Michael removed the blindfold, his face was illuminated by a radiant smile. I heard Lightning, he said. He told me where to step. Dr. Harrison felt a lump in his throat. The connection Michael had with the horses was truly something special, something that could transform lives. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, the air was charged with expectation. The city council meeting was scheduled for the next day, and the future of the project depended on it. What if they say no? Michael suddenly asked. Surprising his parents with his perception of the situation, Sarah and John exchanged glances. Well, sweetheart, Sarah began, carefully choosing her words, if that happens, we'll find another way. The important thing is that we're together, and that we have Lightning and the other horses. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Then, to his parents' surprise, he got up and went to his room, returning moments later with a small object in his hands. This is for you, Dad, he said, handing John a small horseshoe. John looked at the object, confused. Where did you get this? Son, Lightning gave it to me, Michael replied simply. For good luck. Sarah and John felt tears welling up in their eyes. Their son's simple gesture, loaded with so much meaning, touched their hearts deeply. Thank you. Michael, John said, his voice choked with emotion. I'll take it with me tomorrow. That night, as the family prepared for bed, there was a sense that, no matter the outcome of tomorrow's meeting, they had already achieved something precious. They had united in a way they never imagined possible, inspired by Michael's love for the horses and the transformative power of that connection. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. Together, they were capable of overcoming any obstacle. And with Lightning illuminating the way, tomorrow promised to be bright, regardless of the challenges that might arise. As night fell over the field, the soft sound of horses grazing in the distance was like a lullaby, reminding the family that sometimes the most unlikely dreams are the ones that have the power to change the world. The dawn arrived with a mixture of anxiety and hope, hovering over the family's home. The long-awaited day had finally come. The city council would meet to decide the fate of the equine therapy project. John woke up early, carefully adjusting his best shirt and holding the small horseshoe Michael had given him. Sarah found him in the kitchen, an untouched coffee cooling in front of him. Everything will be all right, she said softly, placing her hand on her husband's shoulder. John nodded, a nervous smile on his lips. I hope so. We've worked so hard for this. At that moment, Michael entered the kitchen, still in his pajamas, but with eyes wide open and alert. Dad, he said, his voice clear and determined, can I go with you? Sarah and John exchanged surprised looks. Michael rarely showed interest in public events, preferring the company of horses to that of people. Are you sure? Son, John asked gently, it might be a long and tiring meeting. Michael nodded firmly. I want to be there. For Lightning. For all of us. Deeply touched by their son's courage, Sarah and John agreed. In no time, the family was on their way to City Hall, each of their hearts beating with a mixture of apprehension and hope. Upon arrival, they were surprised by the crowd gathering in front of the building. It seemed that half the town had shown up to support the project. Mrs. Gloria was there, distributing blue ribbons that symbolized hope and healing. Dr. Harrison was animatedly talking with a group of parents, explaining the benefits of equine therapy. "Look at this," Sarah whispered. "Moved. All these people." As they walked towards the entrance, they were approached by a local reporter, Mariana Silva, who had been following the project's development from the beginning. "Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson," she called, approaching with a microphone. "How do you feel about this crucial decision?" John hesitated for a moment, but it was Michael who surprisingly took the lead. "We believe," the boy said, his voice firm and clear. "The horses taught us to trust and have courage. Today, we're here for them and for all the children who need help." An astonished silence followed Michael's words. Mariana, visibly moved, thanked them and stepped away, allowing the family to continue on their way. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. The council members, led by Mayor Augustus, listened attentively to the final presentations. John once again outlined the project's benefits, supported by data provided by Dr. Harrison and moving testimonials from families who had already witnessed the positive effects of Michael's interaction with the horses. When the time for voting came, Mayor Augustus called for a moment of reflection. It was at this moment that Michael, sitting quietly beside his parents, stood up. "May I speak?" he asked, his voice echoing in the silent room. Surprised, the mayor nodded. "Of course, young man. What would you like to say?" Michael took a deep breath and began to speak. His words, though simple, carried a depth and sincerity that touched everyone present. "Before lightning, I lived in a silent and lonely world," he said. "Just the horses taught me to connect, to feel, to love. They showed me a new world, full of possibilities. I want other children like me to have that chance. Please, let us build this dream." A profound silence followed Michael's words. Sarah and John, tears in their eyes, watched the council members exchange moved glances. Mayor Augustus cleared his throat, visibly touched. "Well, I think after that, there's only one thing left to do." He paused dramatically, looking at each of the councillors. "Let's proceed to the vote." The minutes that followed seemed to drag on for an eternity. Each vote was like a heartbeat, charged with expectation and hope. Finally, after the last vote was tallied, the mayor stood up. "Unanimously," he announced, a smile forming on his lips, "the council approves the equine therapy project. Congratulations, family. You've done it." The room erupted in applause and celebrations. Sarah and John hugged each other, tears of joy running down their faces. Michael, with a radiant smile, was enveloped in his parents' arms. As the news spread, the crowd outside burst into cheers. It was as if the entire town was celebrating not just the approval of a project, but the birth of something truly special. That night, back at their property, the family gathered in the field, watching Lightning and the other horses grazing peacefully under the starry sky. "We did it, my love," Sarah said softly, hugging Michael. "Thanks to you." Michael smiled, his eyes shining in the moonlight. "No, Mom. We did it together, us and the horses." John, with his arm around Sarah, looked to the horizon. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We have a lot of work ahead of us." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "But now we know we can overcome anything." As the family remained there, united under the night sky, the soft sound of the horses and the glow of the stars seemed to celebrate with them. It was the beginning of a new journey, a journey of hope, healing, and infinite possibilities. And at the center of it all was Michael, the boy who had once lived in silence, now transformed by the power of love and connection. His smile, illuminated by the moon, was a living testimony to the miracle they had created together. The months that followed the project's approval were a whirlwind of activity. The family's property, once a quiet and isolated place, now buzzed with the sound of hammers, saws, and the constant coming and going of workers. John Tires, with his experience in administration, coordinated the construction work masterfully. The old barn was transformed into a modern stable with spacious and comfortable stalls for the horses. A covered arena was erected for the equine therapy sessions, allowing work to continue even on rainy days. Sarah, for her part, dove headfirst into the administrative side of the project. She spent hours poring over accounting books, learning to manage the finances of a non-profit organization. With the help of community volunteers, she organized fundraising campaigns and sought partnerships with local businesses, but it was Michael who continued to surprise everyone. Under Dr. Harrison's guidance, the boy flourished, developing an intuitive understanding of the needs of both the horses and the children who would come for therapy. "It's incredible, Doctor," Harrison commented to Sarah and John during a break in the construction. "Michael has a natural gift for this. He can calm the most agitated horses and connect with the most introverted children." One day, as Michael was working with Lightning in the new arena, a family arrived for a visit. It was the first time they were receiving potential participants in the program, and everyone was nervous. The girl, Anna, was 8 years old and suffered from cerebral palsy. Her parents brought her in a wheelchair, their eyes full of a mixture of hope and apprehension. Michael, upon seeing the new visitor, approached slowly, guiding Lightning. To everyone's surprise, he knelt beside Anna's chair and said softly, "Hi, I'm Michael, this is Lightning. Would you like to pet him?" Anna, who was usually shy with strangers, hesitantly extended her hand. Lightning gently lowered his head, allowing the girl to touch his muzzle. The smile that lit up Anna's face at that moment was something none of those present would ever forget. "My God," whispered Anna's mother, tears in her eyes. I have never seen her connect with someone so quickly. That moment marked the true beginning of the Equine Therapy Center. Soon, word spread, and more families began to arrive, bringing children with different needs and challenges. Dr. Harrison led the therapeutic team, working closely with physiotherapists, psychologists, and special educators. But it was Michael who often made the difference in the most difficult cases. There was the case of Peter, a boy with severe autism who refused to ride any horse. Michael, with infinite patience, spent days just sitting next to him in the pasture until Peter finally felt comfortable approaching Lightning. Or the case of Marianne, a teenager with depression who found in grooming the horses a form of therapy that no office could provide. As time passed, the Equine Therapy Center became more than just a place of therapy. It was a refuge, a place of hope and transformation. One afternoon, while observing a therapy session, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Mrs. Gloria, her eyes shining with emotion. "You know, my dear," the lady said, "when you started this project, I thought it was just a beautiful dream. But look at this." She gestured to the arena, where children were smiling and horses were gently trotting. "You haven't just built a therapy center. You've built a little piece of heaven here on earth." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Gloria. We couldn't have done it without the support of all of you." That night, the family gathered on the house porch. As they did every night, the distant sound of horses in the pasture mixed with the song of crickets, creating a symphony of nature. "You know," John said, breaking the contemplative silence, "sometimes I wonder how we got here. It seems like it was yesterday that we were worried if we could help Michael connect with the world." Sarah smiled, squeezing her husband's hand. "And now he's helping other children do the same." Michael, who had been quiet, looking at the stars, turned to his parents. "Mom, Daddy," he said, his voice full of a maturity that still surprised them, "thank you for believing in me, for believing in the horses." "Oh, my love," Sarah replied, pulling her son into a hug. "We're the ones who should be thanking you. You've taught us so much." As the family remained there, united under the starry sky, they reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled. From a silent boy and a wild horse, a project had been born that was transforming lives. And there, on that quiet night, with the future stretching bright before them, they knew that this was just the beginning of their story. A story of love, courage, and the transformative power of the connection between humans and animals. The wind whispered softly through the fields, carrying with it the promise of new chapters, new adventures, and infinite possibilities. And at the center of it all, as always, was Lightning, the horse that had illuminated the path to a future that no one could have imagined. The years passed, bringing with them changes and growth. The small equine therapy center that had been born from a boy's love for a wild horse had transformed into a national reference in the treatment of children with special needs. It was a sunny spring morning, and the center was buzzing with activity. Families were arriving from all parts of the country, some traveling for days to participate in what had become an annual tradition, the Festival of Light. Michael, now a young man of 20, walked through the center's courtyard, greeting visitors and volunteers. His green eyes, once distant, now shone with confidence and compassion. He had become not just the heart of the project, but also a respected equine therapist, inspiring other young people with autism to follow their dreams. "Michael," a familiar voice called out. It was Anna, the first child to be treated at the center, now a vibrant teenager. She approached, walking with the help of crutches, a radiant smile on her face. "I did it! I got accepted into veterinary school." Michael hugged her, sharing in her joy. "I knew you could do it, Anna. You're going to be an amazing veterinarian." Not far from there, Sarah and John watched the scene, their hearts overflowing with pride and gratitude. The years had left some silver strands in their hair, but their eyes still shone with the same determination and love that had guided them since the beginning of this journey. "Who would have thought, huh?" John commented, putting his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Remember when we thought we'd have to move to the city?" Sarah laughed softly. "It seems like it was in another lifetime. Look at all of this now." The center had grown considerably. In addition to the main arena and stables, it now had a modern veterinary clinic, accommodations for families coming from afar, and even a small specialized school. But the heart of the project remained the same, the healing power of the connection between humans and horses. The festival was about to begin, and everyone gathered in the main arena. Michael climbed onto a small platform, Lightning faithfully by his side. The old horse, now with a graying muzzle, still carried the same nobility and gentleness that had captivated Michael so many years ago. "Welcome to the 10th Festival of Light," Michael began, his voice clear and confident, echoing through the arena. 10 years ago, we were just beginning, full of dreams and hopes. Today I look at all of you and see those dreams realized and those hopes renewed." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. There were Peter, Marianne, and so many other children and young people whose lives had been touched by the project. There were also new faces, families who had just arrived, their eyes shining with the same hope he had seen in his parents' eyes so many years ago. "And this center is not just about equine therapy," Michael continued. "It's about connection. It's about finding light in darkness, strength in fragility, and love in silence. Each one of you, each horse, each volunteer, is part of that light." As Michael spoke, Sarah noticed a commotion at the arena entrance. To her surprise, she saw Mayor Augustus, now retired, entering accompanied by an official entourage. Michael, noticing the unexpected arrival, concluded his speech, "And it is with this light that we will continue to illuminate the path to a more inclusive and compassionate future. Thank you all for being part of this journey." The applause was deafening. When it finally died down, former Mayor Augustus approached the platform, a warm smile on his wrinkled face. "Michael, Sarah, John," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "on behalf of the city and the state, I came here today to make a special announcement." A murmur of expectation ran through the crowd. "The work you've done here over the last 10 years is nothing short of extraordinary," Augustus continued. "You have not only transformed lives but inspired a change in our entire community. It is with great honor that I announce that the state government has decided to establish here the country's first research institute for equine therapy." The arena exploded in applause and shouts of joy. Sarah and John embraced, tears of happiness streaming down their faces. Michael, momentarily speechless, stroked Lightning's neck, as if wanting to share the news with his old friend. When the celebration finally calmed down, the family gathered in the center of the arena, surrounded by friends, patients, and supporters. Dr. Harrison, now with completely white hair, raised a toast. To the family that taught us that love can move mountains. That connection can heal invisible wounds, and that sometimes all we need to change the world is to believe in the power of a dream. As the sun set on the horizon, bathing the arena in golden light, Michael looked around. He saw the smiles on the children's faces, the hope in the parents' eyes, the dedication of the volunteers, and the serenity of the horses. At that moment, he truly understood the miracle they had created together. Turning to his parents, Michael hugged them tightly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for believing in me, for believing in this dream." Sarah and John, with tears in their eyes, hugged their son back. "No, my love," Sarah replied softly. "Thank you for teaching us to see the world through your eyes. You've illuminated not just our lives, but the lives of so many others." And there, in the center of the arena, surrounded by the love of an entire community, the family felt that they had finally reached the end of one journey and the beginning of an even more extraordinary one. As the stars began to dot the night sky, lightning's soft neigh echoed across the property, a gentle reminder of where it had all begun, a boy, a horse, and a dream that had transformed an entire world. The future stretched out before them, bright and full of possibilities, and they knew that, together, they would continue to spread light, hope, and love, one heart at a time,